His eyes didn't move when I stepped into the open space, like he already knew where I would stop. The others didn't say anything, they just shifted around quietly, standing in a circle around me. I hadn't said yes, I hadn't said anything at all, but I didn't walk away. If you've even here before, you know how this goes. Give a like and hit that subscribe button. It really helps. And if this is your first time you picked a great Oneto start with, glad you're here. Let's get started. The last bit of the trail was enough to burn a little, but I didn't slow down. My boots pushed into loose rocks, my breathing steady, wind brushing the back of my neck. As I reached the top of the hill, leaves crunched under my feet, sunlight catching on my sleeve. Then came the quiet. The clearing stretched wide in front of me, forest dropped off below the edge, golden light spilling over the tops of the trees, swaying in the distance. I chose this trail because it was peaceful. I was sure no one else would bother, but they were. 3 men had already arrived to sat on a flat rock near the edge, and one stood with a foot resting on a small log, hands at his sides. None of them looked surprised. The oldest one turned his head a little, looking at me with a slow, calm glance, like they'd been waiting on someone to show up. We figured you might want company, he said in a steady voice. He held out a bottle of water, the cup already loosened. I paused for a second, heart trying to catch up, then I stepped forward, took the bottle and drank. The cold water soothed my throat and helped breathe easier. I didn't ask why they were there, whatever the reason. They clearly weren't shocked to see me. The skinned man watched me closely. The third stayed quiet, eyes focused in mid-direction. There was a flat rock near Thege. One of them tapped it, gently offering it as a seat. I walked over and sat down. The rock was still warm from the sun. I sat with my legs turned toward the view, hands resting beside me, the water bottle cool in my hand. The second man moved first, the quiet one. He walked over and sat a little ways off. Close enough it, I noticed, but not too close. Hadn't speak, neither did I. A soft wind passed over the overlook, lifting a few strands of my hair. I tucked one behind my ear and glanced over at him. His eye stayed on the horizon, calm and steady. The view itself. You hike the North Trail? The third guy asked from where he stood. His voice was gentler than he thought it would be, just loud enough to hear. I nodded, took the switchbacks past Waterfall. That part's real quiet, the first man said. He looked around slowly, like he was just enjoying the view. I like the quiet, I said. The skinned man was still nearby, quiet, the sunlight warming the space between us. When I shifted a little, he moved too, just enough to notice. Want a photo? The third man asked, nodding toward the view. It's a good spot. I didn't say anything right away. Then I stood up, pulled my phone from my pocket, and handed it to him. He took it with both hands and held it up. I turned toward the view, standing just ahead of the edge. The skinned man came up behind me. As he adjusted my stance, he leaned a bit to the side, looking over my shoulder. Some light hit your shoulder, he said, brushing off a little dust near my shirt. He gave the edge a small shake to fixed crease, then stepped back. The camera shutter clicked when I looked down. At the phone in my hand, he had already moved back. I smiled a little at the photo. The view turned out better than I expected. As I lowered the phone, the screen still glowing with the image, Hess stepped back a bit more. I stayed where I was, steadying myself. As the breeze picked up, there was no rush, just calmed. The wind shifted. He leaned to glance past me at the view, close enough that I felt it, but he didn't touch me. My breath caught for a second, probably from the height, not the view. I didn't turn around. The quietsman stepped up and looked at me with a question in his eyes. He brushed off my shoulder a leaf, maybe a nodded. Gently his hand paused for just a second before he pulled it back, his face unreadable. Still looking out, I shifted to the side a little. I glanced at him. Tasho, I noticed the first man stepped closer. The one who had spoken earlier hadn't say anything. This time he reached out his hand. I shook it, giving him a smile. It was slow, simple, no rush. It felt more like a goodbye than a hello. I realized I'd been holding my breath and slowly let it out. I stayed there a moment longer to steady myself. My heart had picked up without me realizing it. The sound of the wind faded. Even with quiet, I could feel how close they were. I shifted my footing suddenly, aware of the uneven rock below me. They moved silently, nearby but not too close. They weren't crowding. They weren't in a hurry. The whole place felt different now, quieter, sharper. I felt the tension settle in me. From head to toe, my breath came shallow as I focused on keeping my balance. I let out a breath, with a small shake, brushing away a bit of nervous energy. He reached out just for a second, like he might steady me by the side of my ijikot. His hand hovered in the air for a second, then dropped to his side. I shifted a little to steady myself. The breeze caught the edge of my shirt as I moved, but I didn't feel it right away. He stood quietly next to me, and for a moment, it felt like everything just paused. The first guy lifted his hand toward my collar, stopping near the center of my chest. He didn't touch me, just stayed still and calm. My heart was beating fast but steady. Without thinking, I adjusted my grip on the rock beside me. placed my hand there gently to anchor myself. He looked at me once, then helped me as I stepped carefully onto the ledge behind us. His hand hovered near my back for balance, staying close. His presence steady beside me. The sun flared behind us. The wind tugged at me again, but I barely noticed when I stopped moving. He stepped in front of me and stood there without a word. He didn't reach for anything, just stayed still, close and quiet. He didn't speak. His body stayed relaxed, his eyes steady. I could feel one of them behind moving just enough that I felt surrounded. The third guy moved in too, and without being told, I rested my hand gently against his arm. He didn't pull back. I stood still, aware of each one of them around me. This silence felt heavier now, like the air right before a thunderstorm. My breathing changed, still calm, just quieter. One of them shifted behind me and another reached up to brush a loose strand of hair from my face. I blinked as the wind picked it up again. When I opened my eyes, the view hadn't changed, but I saw it differently. The one behind me shifted his footing in, quiet and steady. He braced himself in the ground for balance. Just beside me stayed where I was, moving slightly to adjust to the uneven ground under my boots. In front of me, the man reached his hand up and paused near my chin. Hadn't move. I gave a small nod. The space us stayed still. Something stiffed. Took a slow breath, trying to stay grounded. I noticed movement. Summy and Nearby adjusting their balance. Another brushed lightly against my elbow as I moved my arm to get steady. Without thinking, my hand reached out and touched his shoulder. It didn't matter whose they were, all close now, quietly standing around me. Their presence surrounded me, and sure, I could hear my own heartbeat, quick but steady in the stillness of it. Though it was so quiet, I felt completely awake. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or just frozen in the moment. I noticed someone beside me shift again, adjusting where they stood. A hand lifted near my face, brushing the airborne, pulling back again. I blinked, stopping for just a second before opening my eyes once more. I realized how close they all were, each one near me, quiet and still. Together they formed a loose circle around me without saying a word. They didn't say anything. They just waited, giving me the space to move. When I was ready, my chest rose unevenly, the stillness finally catching up to me. And then something shifted, small, but I felt it. I tried to speak, but the words never quite made it out. One of them gently took my hand and placed it near his side, steady, grounding. Another leaned in slightly, his forehead almost touching mine, like a silent show of support. I stopped trying to keep track of where they all were. I just felt the calm surrounding me. I lost my balance for half a second, caught it before it went too far. My knees felt shaky and I reached out instinctively to steady myself. They adjusted to quiet movements, binned me beside me in front, settling into place. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. Every movement felt intentional, like they all knew how to move without saying a word. The silence between us felt held, like something waiting just beneath the surface. I didn't back away. I found something solid in front of me and held one tight. My fingers gripped fabric, grounding me in whatever steadiness it offered. My breathing was uneven, thick with tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. I tilted my head a little, letting the wind brush the back of my neck. There was quiet movement behind me, soft, subtle, but close enough to feel Onf. Them raised a hand slightly, then lowered it again, never making contact. Another stayed nearby, steady and aware, giving me room to stay centered. I kept holding on to whatever was close, steadying myself without really thinking about it. Right then, it didn't matter where any of them stood. That I felt surrounded, safe somehow. Tension pulled up my shoulders, my breath short as I tried to stay balanced. One of them said something low, soft to Quieto catch, but it didn't matter. The moment didn't need words. Then another shift, barely anything. A quiet change in theater. A hand hovered gently near my forehead, calm and slow. Someone else leaned in close, his hand resting beside mine without touching it. I adjusted my posture, automatically erecting to the weight of the silence around me. I let out a quiet breath, focusing on staying grounded. My arms stayed where they were, steady, unmoving. I pressed both feet down evenly, rooting myself in the space. I stood in. My hand stayed still. I didn't move, and for a long moment I stayed therein.